put themselves forward?
I think this is the link to the first question that we've just had. The reason why we've been successful in reducing the prevalence of coronavirus is because of the massive volumes of public participation and compliance. And the same applies to the track, trace, isolate and support strategy, test and protect that we're putting out in Scotland. It relies on people coming forward where they have symptoms, indicating that they have those symptoms, and then for us pursuing the contacts. And obviously there'll be privacy applied to essentially the source of the virus that's been drawn to the attention of other individuals. But it fundamentally relies on public participation, public trust and public confidence. And that's why I really appreciate the comments that David made about how the First Minister has communicated about the challenges that are inherent in handling a pandemic, and we need to have that similar level of communication and consent from members of the public in wrestling with the contact tracing strategy.
I mean, of course, it's a bit unfair to let absolutely everything in law come through. I'm no apologist, but nonetheless, there'll be other factors that might influence whether people want to comply in terms of can they afford to take the time off work, that kind of thing. I mean, Alex, just coming to you, Matthew's question is, why is it that other nations have managed to do this faster? And could the Scottish and UK governments have learned anything from these and therefore done it faster ourselves?
Well, I think on the second part of that, the obvious answer has to be yes, and this is one of the many things that will be considered by the inevitable series of public inquiries that are going to follow the eventual conclusion of this emergency. One of the ironies here is that one of the fiercest critics of what you might term the dysfunction of the British state or the Whitehall apparatus and so on is one Dominic Cummings. He thinks that we need to fundamentally rethink, reimagine, reorganise the entire business of government. I happen to think that some of his diagnosis is quite persuasive. He is, of course, now in a position to do something about it and is discovering that curing something is rather more difficult than diagnosing it. I think that is something that is a long-term challenge for the British state. At the moment, as viable contact tracing operations, an awful lot of that does depend on government communication, and that is one of the areas where I think we have seen Boris Johnson actually, fail, and demonstrably so, John, that he does not give the impression of being on top of his brief. He does not inspire public confidence, and that is a significant failing at a time in a crisis where communication, clarity and consistency of communication are, if not half the job, then certainly a significant proportion of the Prime Minister's job or the First Minister's job or anybody in a leadership position at present.
OK, well, Helen, do you want to respond to that?
Well, actually, one thing I want to pick up is that the success of the next phase does rely on people being actually responsible and coming forward and booking the test and then...
But I'm just in terms of what Alex was saying in terms of Boris Johnson failing as a communicator.
I actually think he's an excellent communicator and also very effective at motivating the troops. And I do think, and I know that you can of course criticise any stage of the pandemic if only this or if only that, but also that actually extraordinary things have happened. Extraordinary things have been achieved, huge growth in the volume of testing at incredible pace.
We have got the second highest death toll in the world. In absolute numbers.
So I think we should we are absolutely looking at what other countries are doing. I think one thing we do know is that now is not the moment where we can actually really compare those things. The important thing is every life lost is somebody who we mourn and with sadness, but we also need to make sure that we are able to move on and keep the infection rate under control and try and begin to get life more in the direction of normal now.
Ian?
Well, I think, Fiona, one of the key features of this whole pandemic has been the lack of a coordinated international response. And I'm tempted to say at this point, could viewers in Scotland please turn over to BBC Two, because in the answer...
God, please don't.
We can't even...
if you don't mind.
We can't even get the four nations to work together. So the explanation that Helen gave at the very start of her answer to this question is different in Scotland, it's going to be different in Wales and different in Northern Ireland. And why we don't have coordination across the UK is one of the big questions that people keep asking. And let's not forget, and Layla's absolutely right, the reason we are so far behind in international terms with this track and trace is because we abandoned that as a principle back in early March and have only come round to realising that's the only way out of this. And the key elements of that, if I can just finish on this point, you have to test. This goes all the way back to what the World Health Organization said in January. England has a dreadful testing record, and you're going to have to do at least 250,000 a day to get anywhere near this being proper, and that's what we've been calling for. And Scotland has one of the worst testing rates in the entire world.
Okay, well,
until that's resolved, this system cannot operate properly to keep people safe.
John Swinney, do you want to come back on that?
Well, we're now in a situation where Scotland has the capacity to do 15,000 tests on a daily basis.
Yes, but you're not doing anything like those numbers, though. Sorry, John, to interrupt, but you're not doing anything like those numbers, 15,000.
Well, we've got the capacity in place to now do that when it's at the most critical moment when we've suppressed the virus. And we have the capacity to do the contact tracing. We've got the communications in place to set that out. We've had that in place at the critical moment where we begin to relax some of the great restrictions that have been in place. So the strategy has come together in exactly the right timing to make sure that we have the capacity in place to provide the support that individuals in the country require.
And just to be clear, John, what's stopping you reaching the capacity? Sorry, John, just to be clear, what's stopping you reaching the capacity? So you've got capacity for 15,000 tests, for example, and you're doing nothing like those numbers.
Well, we're constantly expanding the range of individuals who are able to get tests. So, for example, we are doing a great deal more availability of testing within care homes. We have mobile testing services moving around the country. We have much more capacity available for people to go to get particular tests. We've got availability in place for key workers and for home care workers and for those delivering care services. So the whole range of different ways we've expanded the capacity and the eligibility to make sure that individuals can get the tests that require it.
OK, Ian, very briefly, and then I want to
The
bring in
epicentre of this pandemic is in our care homes in Scotland. Over half of all the deaths are now in care homes, and 46% of all deaths are in care homes. We are still not testing care home patients. We're still not testing on a regular basis care home staff. And you can't talk about capacity. You have to talk about the delivery. It's simply not happening.
You know that.
Not with the care homes that get in touch with me day and daily, whose patients, residents and staff are not being tested.
My question is, without the antibody, I mean, am I going to be having to self-isolate over and over again? You know, if I come into contact with someone once, do I self-isolate and take 14 days off? And I come into contact with someone else, do I then take another 14 days off? Well, people who are self-employed and other people are not going to be able to manage that. It's not going to be possible for people.
I mean, this is the tricky thing, isn't it? Because, as Alex is saying, you might have to self-isolate more than once. And let's just remind ourselves what that means. That means, for example, if you have to share a bathroom with your family, you have to use it at a different time from them, you have to wipe it all down, you have to put your rubbish in several bags when you put it out. I mean, it's away from your entire family. You might do the same.
We're not asking people to isolate within their households.
So you're not worried that they infect their family.
Got symptoms, but this is the case.
Yes, if you've just been contacted.
You're being asked to self-isolate at home with your house, but you're not asking your house to isolate. But it's doing that period where you're in the incubation period to see whether you might get the virus. And I recognise that there's a risk that you might be asked to do that more than once, but if people follow social distancing, so if people are following social distancing and minimising their contact, so if they're having to go to a workplace to work, but social distancing in the workplace is really important because that's how you avoid becoming somebody who's a contact of the sort that needs to isolate.
Of course, we could, in England, you can go to barbecues now. I think in Scotland, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't.
You can yes, you can.
You can go to a
Tomorrow,
barbecue.
yes, because you can two households no more than 8 people. It's It's 6 in England.
6 in England.
2 households can meet socially distanced in public or private outdoor spaces. So you could have a barbecue. This is how ridiculous this whole situation is. It's 8 in Scotland. It's 6 in England. Why can't we just get a UK-wide approach and everyone works together?
And also, a barbecue all keeping 2 metres distance, that's going to be quite... I mean, that's a heck of a garden you're going to have to accommodate that.
I mean,
and for no more than 15 minutes.
I mean, we're asking people to know gradually. It's some small steps to try and make life be a little bit better.
Well, no, we're all just trying to make sense of exactly how it works, since we're all going to have to be doing this. OK, let's... Jeanette, you just wanted to come in. Let me bring you in.
I work from home and my girls go into vulnerable houses. Now, this track and trace has the ability to close my business down every single week. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm already closed. Financially, it's been a nightmare. And now, if any of my staff or any of my families, or they go into any of the houses to clean or do anything, we're closed. And I was wondering who's going to pick up the pieces for me? Because the small businesses who work from home have already been missed out on everything. And now we've got track and trace that could close me down again every single week, or have girls going off sick because they've been in vulnerable houses, vulnerable places, and they've been doing their job. And I just don't know what to do. How's the government going to sort this out?
Because you run a cleaning company, don't you, Jeanette? So you've got various people going out to clean other people's homes. So John Swinney, what is the compensation package going to be? I mean, so if you are someone, either you're Jeanette who runs a company, or you're someone who works for Jeanette, obviously lots of small companies in this position, they suddenly get, either they get symptoms, or they're told, you've been close to someone who's got symptoms, you've got to self-isolate for the next 14 days, and let's see what happens. What compensation will there be for them?
I think the point that Jeanette makes illustrates the fact that there has to be ongoing support arrangements in place for individuals and for businesses to make sure that people can navigate their way through what's going to be a difficult period if they have to participate in contact tracing.
So what will they be, John, very specifically? Because the provisions for the self-employed, for example, come to an end in about 3 days. Obviously, people working for Jeanette are self-employed, so what provision will be put in place for them?
That's really what I was coming on to, that there has to be a need for an ongoing scheme of support to assist individuals in that respect, which is why we continue to press the UK Treasury to recognise this is not a short-term issue, this is a long-term issue that we've got to see sustained. Now, the indications from the Treasury are that, for example, on the furlough scheme, that's going to be constrained in August by the Chancellor. And that's a very damaging news, because we know that the implications of COVID are going to be with us for a long time. So we're appealing to the UK government to recognise the longevity of this problem and put in place the support to enable that to be the case.
OK, well, we've got Helen Waitley here. Let's ask her. So in someone in Jeanette's position, very specifically, self-employed, that comes to an end in the next 3 days, what will the government do for people like her?
So, I know on this side of the job, the importance of having the support for instance, are required to isolate because of test and trace.
Well, it's up to the UK government.
And I know that's something that the Chancellor will specifically to look at is on the self-employment question. We know that for those who are employed, they will be eligible for statutory sick pay.
Sure.
If they are asked to isolate.
But for someone in Jeanette's position, specifically, she's come on the programme this evening saying, what are you going to do for people like me and who work for people like me? What is the government going to do?
I can't preempt what the decision of the Chancellor will make on that, but it's absolutely true that we do need to make sure that people are able to afford what they need in life and recognise the cost of this. Also, that we do need to have something which is economically sustainable. So we need to have a way to be beginning to restart the economy, because of the huge amount of economic support that has gone to those who are in employment, those who are in businesses, across the economy, a huge amount of support. We now need to get the economy back up and running, and more people going back.
Well, I'm sure Jeanette will wait with great interest to see what comes out. As the Prime Minister said today, we will look after everybody locally who is affected by this. So let's see what happens. Let's hear now from Rena Cuthbertson. Rena.
Good evening, Fiona. Good evening, panel. was a policy and decision regarding the emptying of hospital beds, with the patients not being tested, and the outrageous consequences on our elderly citizens, a planned arrangement, and if so, does this not highlight the lack of value and respect that we place in the elderly?
So was it a planned arrangement, allowing people back into care homes without being tested? And does it highlight the lack of value and respect? Yes. Alex Massey?
Well, the care homes situation, I think, is one of those areas where governments in all parts of the United Kingdom faced a terrible set of choices. You know, that in hindsight, as Nicola Sturgeon said this week, they would probably make some decisions differently. You know, at the time when people were released from hospital into care homes, it was because they feared that the NHS and the hospitals were going to be overwhelmed with COVID cases. And so, you know, what do we do with people who are, you know, delayed discharge, bed blocking, whatever? You know, well, get them out, almost regardless of their circumstance. And that now, because the sort of tsunami of COVID cases didn't quite materialise, that now looks to be a terrible mistake. And obviously, with hindsight, it was a mistake, but at the time it was made, I think it's reasonable for politicians to say, well, but this was the choice that we had available to us. But you can only do that, I think. You can only get the public to trust you if you communicate with candour, if you allow that mistakes will be made in a you know, fiercely complicated and unprecedented set of situations. But you can't just allow that mistakes will be made. You have to actually sort of admit to them and take ownership of them as well. If you treat people like adults, there is a chance that they will understand the position you're coming from. But you can't just sort of deny that any mistakes took place. And it seems to me to be infantilizing the governments of government ministers wherever they happen to be to try and pretend that that could be the case. You know, people understand that this is a really, really difficult situation to manage, and it's why, even though patients may be beginning to wear thin, I think there is still a residual degree of goodwill for government if government can be shown to be responsive to the situation, can show that it is accepting and taking ownership of mistakes, and the care home situation is clearly one of them. But you can't go around prattling on about how you've thrown a protective ring around care homes at the same time as thousands and thousands of people are dying in care homes. And the final point of the question there, it is clear, I think, that for a long, long time care homes have been a sort of overlooked, too often forgotten part of the whole health and social care network, and that sometimes perhaps seen as a convenient place to park people whose presence elsewhere might be deemed undesirable or too complicated.
Let's hear from Elaine in the audience. You've had your hand up for a short while now.
Hi, Fiona. I agree with Alex there. I think at the start of this pandemic it was a tsunami and no one really knew what they were doing. And I think the choice, when we saw those horrific images from the Italian hospitals of patients lying out in corridors, couldn't catch a breath, I think the right decision was made at the time to make sure our hospitals were clear, that we wouldn't have those images in the front of our newspapers. And I think Nicola Sturgeon has looked back, like Alex said there, and thought, in hindsight, it is a great thing, and she probably would have did things differently. But I think the choice at the time with having that tsunami of patients, with COVID versus letting elderly patients go into a care home where we probably thought that was going to be a safer place for them at the time, was a lose-lose choice now that we look back. But at the time, to try and get away from those images of what we were seeing all over the press with people not getting a hospital bed, and we didn't. It didn't come to that, which is a good thing. So I think it is. It's a lose-lose. It's an unfortunate situation to look back.
Rena, you wanted to come back in. You asked the question.
Yes, thanks very much. I think in terms of the planning, we have known about this since the end of December, at the beginning of January. I know it's not a long time, but what has been clear from the very start, the most vulnerable in the communities is the elderly. And we let people leave hospitals without being tested and put them into care homes. We put them back into their own homes to be cared for by home care workers or by support agencies or by family, and nobody was tested. And so I know there was tough decisions, and I'm not just talking about the Scottish Government, I mean generally right across the UK, you know, and I know we were flooded with pictures of Italy, you know, but maybe if the cameras were in and out the care homes, we would be flooded with as many pictures of people dying in care homes horrendously. I just think it's, you know, it's there's no winners in this, and I know it's been difficult, and I know that, you know, the whole thing's new to us. So I just think they're the most vulnerable, and they are always, I feel, the first to be forgotten. You know, we clap and we applaud Captain Tom, and many of his generation have just been left to die in care homes, and I just think it's outrageous. And I think just the other thing Fiona to say is, I've listened tonight, and every time the Conservative member speaks, all I hear is, well, you know, we can't compare ourselves to other countries. Let's put the Dominic Raab to bed. Let's not talk about anything that has shown us up to be, you know, the unorganised or, you know, party that we are.
Well, Helen, I'll give you a chance to respond to that in a minute. But John, just coming in terms of, thank you, Rena, for that. I'm not trying to cut you off there. In terms of what Rena's saying, in terms of what Alex is saying as well, Nicola Sturgeon is saying, you know, with hindsight, which of course is a wonderful thing, I might have done things differently. When it comes to care homes, specifically asking you, what would you have done differently?
I think the circumstances that have been narrated by all three of the colleagues that have spoken, I can't really disagree with their analysis. At the time that COVID was coming towards us, we realised and we thought the best thing to do was to ensure that older people who were being accommodated in hospitals where there was no clinical need for them to be there would be better protected if they were in care homes, because if there was an influx of COVID cases into hospitals where vulnerable elderly people were, the danger of cross-infection was very high. So the judgment was, if it was safe to do so, if the risk assessment was undertaken, those individuals could be accommodated either at home with support or in a care home. And there's been constant political pressure on us to reduce delayed discharges in hospitals, to get older people out of hospitals and into care home situations. So we followed that approach, but of course we have discovered that just how brutal COVID is to older members of our society and our community. So,
but surely we knew, John, sorry to interrupt, but surely we could see from the examples happening in other countries quite how brutal coronavirus was to the older generation. That evidence was already there.
Yes, but my point is that we judged that the best and safest way to support those individuals was in a care home setting or at home with support, rather than the hospital setting, which would be the epicentre of handling coronavirus cases.
OK, well, let me just turn to Leila for a moment. Just hearing what Alex Massey was saying, what John's saying. I mean, there were other countries before us grappling with this, and they admitted people from hospitals back into care homes. But in some cases, in some countries, they put them into quarantine, special places, or quarantine within care homes. Is there anything we could have learned from
A new Intel
reasonably, or is Alex right that actually, you know, this was the best we could have done in this circumstance?
It's incredibly hard to say. I look at all what other countries have done, and as you say, in some sort of quarantine centres or interim places to go, it's not exactly clear. I mean, obviously, what has happened with COVID-19 in care homes has been an absolute tragedy, but the reasons for that are not quite as clear-cut as sometimes people are assuming. So we hear people say, oh, it's because everyone was sent out of hospital, but actually when you look at the data, it's not totally clear that that was something that has created this challenge. And in fact...
Well, you think it might have spread in care homes anyway?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know when this first started circulating. It looks as though when you started testing has a real impact on this, looking at other countries and care homes. It looks like people going in and out of care homes, potentially, of course, playing its role. And while we really, really want an answer to that, it's too early to figure out what's going on, but we can see that we need an answer and we need to learn. And I guess that what I'd say is that it really exposes the underinvestment and the undervaluing of social care for successive decades, what we need here is a long-term plan. We've seen what's going on in social care, and it's really great that the government is now giving some money towards social care to say, goodness, we need to bolster, for example, your infection control mechanisms. Our members have been telling us for ages that while hospitals have started to get PPE in, care homes have been in a much worse position for that. There's a lot of disparity here. So there's now funding so that care homes are able to get better infection control processes in place and things like that. But that's a short-term fix. And when we look at this, we think, goodness, the moment is here for social care reform. And what are we going to do about it? What's the government going to do about it?
Ian.
Well, I think the chronic underfunding of social care across the United Kingdom and in Scotland, the chickens are now coming home to roost.
And this is also a problem under Labour.
It's been a problem for a long time, and with what we need some kind of political consensus to fund social care. We've been talking about this now for too long, but let's go through what we already knew. We knew that the prevalence of this disease was in older people. It was much more severe in older people. We knew from the 2014 report and Task Force for Social Care that there was 34 recommendations, very few of them implemented in Scotland. We knew in 2015 that the government and the Scottish Government had said they would eradicate bed blocking. It wasn't done. We knew from the Silver Swan report there was a problem with PPE and a problem with testing if we had a global pandemic. All of that has since happened, and the decision was made by the Scottish Government to move 912 elderly people from hospital care homes. Now, that in itself is a big decision, and it's a decision I completely agree with John that these big decisions have to be made. But the key thing here was that we're taken from hospital to care homes without testing. So we're essentially exporting the disease on the people that it affects the most into care homes.
We have just heard Laila say we can't be sure that that was the critical deciding factor in terms of the exponential growth of coronavirus.
46% of all coronavirus deaths in Scotland have been in our care homes. This is the epicentre of coronavirus, and that's why, because we sent people there without testing, we sent people there without the lack of PPE, and the figures are, Fiona, you looked at them earlier, Scotland does have one of the worst testing rates in the world, and the biggest problem with that is trying to get testing into the social care sector. We're only doing between 4,000 and 6,000 a day, so how can we possibly protect the residents and the staff in care homes without fundamentally testing them regularly and making sure that they are safe?
Helen, let me just bring you back to Rena's original question, which is, was the policy a planned arrangement to remove patients in care homes from hospitals who haven't been tested? And does it highlight the respect and respect we place on elderly citizens?
So every step of the way, the government followed scientific guidance on what to do and clinical guidance. And
well, there was also, hang on, Helen, there was also government guidance. So on April the 2nd, the UK government guidance was negative tests are not required for asymptomatic elderly patients prior to transfers into care home. And that was government advice.
But our government guidance was informed by the science and by the scientific guidance. But what has happened over time, the things that we have learned. So, for instance, we've learned, and the world has learned, that actually we have a situation with people who may be asymptomatic carriers of the virus, and it's particularly hard, we now know, with older people who don't display the most common set of symptoms. So there's a particular reason, which is why we're now doing testing of all staff and residents in care homes for older people, those with dementia, exactly to do that, to pick up those who may be asymptomatic, as well as those who have symptoms. Because we're learning. But I mean, just to go back and to pick up on some of the comments from the audience, some really, really thoughtful comments. But one thing I will say is that I became the Care Minister on 14th of February, and since then, I mean, so much of my time, as so many people in government, has been on how we can support social care, both care homes and home care, through the pandemic. And we know it's really hard. One of the things that we saw early on was looking at Spain and a situation where the army went into care homes where they've been abandoned and people have just been left and left to die even from neglect. So we've put in place a whole new reporting system so we know what's going on in care homes, so we get a picture of where there might be risk to that. I should also say, and I noticed I talk so much to care homes, that we should recognise that in England, over 60% of care homes have not had COVID outbreak. So actually lots of care homes have managed to do an amazing job in keeping COVID out of their care homes, and many of those who've had it have now recovered from that and things are getting better.
Jocelyn, you wanted to come in after Ian. We were almost out of time, so briefly, I just want to let you have another word.
I think the point I wanted to make was that in Ian's last answer, he talked about the need for there to be measures to tackle delayed discharges, and then when the government tackles the issue of delayed discharge, we get criticised for it by Ian Murray. There are really difficult decisions that have had to be taken here with the best interests of the population at heart, tough decisions in tough circumstances, and many of the measures we've taken have supported care homes to make sure that individuals have had the resources and the equipment and the assistance in place to make sure they were kept safe in very difficult circumstances.
OK, I'm afraid, Ian, I know you want to come back in, but our hour is up. And I just want to say, Ellen, I can see you've got your hand up there, and we've run out of time, so forgive me for not coming to you. Tonight, our questions came from Glasgow, and thank you so much to all of you. Next week, we will have an audience, a virtual audience from Southampton, and after that from Cardiff. So from now on, we're going to be looking for 12 people to join our discussion in the way that we have tonight via video link. So if you'd like to be part of that, and I really hope that you will, and you come from either of those areas, do get in touch via the usual way, and then we will get back in touch with you. And of course, if you want to continue the discussion, you can join Adrian Charles and guests on Question Time Extra Time, and that is on 5 Live right now. But I just want to say thank you very much to the panel for coming into the studio tonight, and of course thank you, John and Alex, for joining us down the line, and thank you very much to our guinea pigs this evening, the first time we've done this, joining us from Glasgow. I'm very grateful to all of you, and of course to you at home for watching from Question Time.